All right, we're ready to get started with the next session. Hope you all had to have some good refreshments, some good breaks, some good conversations, a lot of idea sharing. Speaking of ideas and information, we have a lot of really good food for thought in this our last two sessions here. So we thank you for your attention and staying on with this. So I'm going to turn it over to Gladys Cook with the Florida Housing Coalition to introduce the panel.
Thank you. I don't know if our mics are hot.
We are.
Those mics.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today and staying here for so much information. I feel like we've all been talking about ideas and they're finally starting to knit together with today. How many of you all are planners? Yay, I'm a planner. I'm a derp. So just so you know. But when I graduated, I typed my thesis on a typewriter. Just so you know. So we keep talking about the Florida Housing Coalition. So we're a statewide nonprofit organization. We're about 30, 40 years old, who's counting. And we provide technical assistance and training to local governments and nonprofits. And we have a disaster recovery and resilience team. And you saw them on Alyssa's slides. And we started right after Hurricane Irma when we started doing a weekly webinar, just so that people that were trying to recover didn't have to keep going to all the Division of Emergency Management and FEMA meetings. We did them. And then Fannie Mae called and said, hey, can we sponsor that? And now we're going into 4 years, every Friday at 1:30. In fact, we just missed it today. We have this webinar and probably some of you have been on it and many of you have probably tuned in. So just that's something that happens. But when CJ approached us to work on REACH, we really didn't know where we were headed. And so we ended up kind of throwing a lot of things on the wall, and it really kind of reinforced my faith in planning when we were able to look at the whole planning framework in the community, the whole region. We went through thousands of pages of plans, trying to find any policy that was favorable toward resilience. And there were some that were close, but we just found there was a lot of room for improvement. And that's what that checklist is all about, and that Alyssa talked about. And the checklist, it's actually been, we were invited to East Central Florida RPC to do another checklist for them. We just did one for Orange County, but I think we're going to move away from all the methodology stuff and just start looking at plans and finding how to get the best policy language. So today, I'm just going to make a few more comments and then we're going to get right to our panelists and talk about funding. But we've had so many tools today and I put them into different categories. The first is risk assessment. And that's what the University of Florida Coastal Hazard Tool is. That's what the REACH planning tool is, to help find where we're at risk. That's what the University of South Florida's vulnerability tool is. Where are the vulnerable populations? So once you have that assessment, then you can start with your planning. And we had so many great speakers. There's so much going on in this region with the density bonus and the accessory dwelling units and the architect from New York with those concepts. We're really starting to get there. But you don't really do any of that until you have money for implementation. And it's like, well, what do you do? Well, we're all about mitigation. Okay, and mitigation is, and I forgot to mention Keep Safe Florida, that tool. It's all about finding out where you're weak and then mitigating it so that you're stronger, so that when there's a disaster, you will be resilient. And I asked Taryn Sabia, I don't know where she is, I said, what's climate resilience? What's equity? And she said, it's when everybody knows that they can safely shelter in place. And I thought, what a great way. There weren't any buzzwords in there at all. It's just, my home is safe. If I'm ordered to evacuate, yes, I will. But I'm pretty good here and I can stay here. And if I do have to evacuate when I come home, I will have a house to come home to. It won't be gone. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with affordable housing. So, the techniques are retrofit, hardening, buyout, and elevation, relocating people. Hillary's going to talk a little bit about some of that. Mobile home retrofit is really important. It's really simple. You just tie them down. And then half of the day, we talked about the shortage of affordable housing. That's a resilience indicator to the shortage. And so new construction of both single family, multifamily housing. So that's all we're trying to do. It's kind of simple. It's not exotic or anything like that. So there's a couple things CJ wanted me to talk about. One was the community land trust, and that's been mentioned thankfully enough today. But when we're talking about preserving affordability in perpetuity, that's what the community land trust does by owning the dirt underneath the houses. And every once in a while, a funding source comes along that says this is only for community land trusts. We had that with the Hurricane Irma money, and we got all these calls from developers all over the state saying, how do I get a community land trust? Well, you have to start now, and it can be a nonprofit organization, or it can just be a program. It can just be the 99-year ground lease. Local governments can just use the ground lease. Pinellas County uses the land trust in that way. But we recommend that every single community have a community land trust, even if it's not really active yet, but just get one and have it ready for when those things come. And for heaven's sake, if you're ever going to donate land or give density or even funding, require that the housing that's built on it be affordable in perpetuity. Commissioner Cruz earlier said that if you throw money at housing, it's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Well, not if the housing is going to stay affordable forever. It's a long-term solution. So that's the Community Land Trust partner. And Jamie Ross started the Community Land Trust Institute of Florida 20 years ago. And so we have all kinds of training materials on that. We will help you start one and put everything together for you. So another thing CJ wanted me to talk about was the BRIC funding, FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities. And when it came out in 2020, there was $500 million, $500 million, and it's grants that go through FEMA, and then local governments have to apply to our Florida Division of Emergency Management to get the funding. But they consolidate a lot of different funding sources into BRIC. And in 2021, they came out with $1 billion. It's been hideously oversubscribed. I think there was 1,200 applications in 2020 for $4 billion. And all they had was $500 million. And all of these things are a needs assessment. So when we see this, when we use the Keep Safe Florida tool and we see all these multifamily properties that need work, that's a needs assessment. And HUD responds to the words unmet needs. And so we just wanted to keep doing that. But FEMA has really grabbed onto equity and housing. Housing is eligible activity under BRIC. There was only one housing project that was funded in Florida with the first year of BRIC, and that was Pasco County. So Hillary Bruno is here with that and other things. But we want to see local governments start to have their housing people talk to their emergency management departments, because BRIC speaks FEMA language. Housers speak mortgages and subsidy and financing, and they're two different things. And so to use BRIC for housing, you really need to know how to do the cost benefit analysis and have shovel-ready projects that can fit into those guidelines. But we see it as a great resource. And another one is Resilient Florida, and it got started last year. The governor just signed the Office of Resiliency, permanent office. It will be in the governor's office, and there will be a permanent resiliency director. But one of their first duties is to create a statewide flood sea level rise resilience plan. And you guys are already there. So hopefully that will help direct Resilient Florida funds. And that's going to be about $1 billion a year when it really gets going. They already had their first round and their second round this year, 2022. It's closed, but there's a portal at Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Local governments can apply. They have planning grants. And one of the planning grants from last year was put in by the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council to have resilience work done, including the resilience, plan policy checklist that we're doing. And so that's actually funded by DEP. So don't forget, you can use this funds for both planning and BRIC and Resilient Florida. So there's the other funding is the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, SLRF. I say that much better after happy hour, but it's so much money. It's too numbery. I can't even conceive of it anymore, but all of the counties have a big pile of money. It's like 10 times their housing budget. The cities can apply for the funding. And when people ask us, can you use any of that money for housing, we should just say yes, because it's so broad, the uses are so broad that there's no reason not to seize on this. It's a lifetime opportunity. Florida could wipe out homelessness with these funds. I mean, there's just so much money there, and we know how to spend money in Florida because we have state trust funds and we've been doing it, so we're good at it. So Rob is going to be talking about how St. Petersburg is the leader in the state for using ARPA funds for affordable housing. And so we want to get right into that. Rob Gertis is the city administrator for the city of St. Petersburg. And I'm going to let you come up here and take this over, and they'll move your slides, right?
Thank you so much, Gladys. It's Friday afternoon. Everybody still awake? Yeah? All right. I was told this was a resilient group. Hey, I got a few laughs out of that. All right. I'm going to talk about multifamily affordable housing in St. Petersburg with a highlight on ARPA, but I'm going to talk about a couple other funding sources too. And I'm going to try and be very brief as I can, but I think it's important to just give you some background that I think will help inform the question and answer period. So I think it's important that you know the city of St. Petersburg's goals related to multifamily housing. We want to produce or preserve 2,400 units in a 10-year period that started in January 2020. And we anticipate that that'll cost us approximately $60 million. So you can see why ARPA would be a big part of that. We have done other things to try and help, like regulatory reform, and I'm happy to talk if there's any questions related to that. I'll be happy to talk about that later. Here's where we're at now. Basically, in the first 2 years, we have 740 units in the pipeline. You can see the different AMIs. So we're making progress, but we have a long way to go. I want to walk you through, where the funding comes from in our plan, because I think that's what's really important today. And, one of the things I'll say is that for me, when it comes to home dollars or when it comes to SHIP dollars, they're helpful, but as a city of St. Petersburg, to try and reach our goals, we can't rely on those two funding sources. They're just not significant enough. So you can see ARPA on the multifamily affordable side, 26.5 million, and we think we need 60 million to reach our goal, how significant that is for us. You can see city-owned land, and I want to talk a little bit about local funding because I think that's another issue that is so important. So the penny for Pinellas for land acquisition, $15 million. The South St. Petersburg CRA, $8.5 million. This is just for affordable multifamily. Our floor area ratio bonus, Liz and Derek and their team are here today. Thank you for all the work you did on that to boost that up. And our economic stability fund, which is really interesting. And I'm just going to spend a second on this. In my opinion, to provide a significant number of units, we need to have some creative funding sources, some flexible funding sources, some things that we can take action with quickly. And some of these sources do that for us. So economic stability fund, almost every community has some type of rainy day fund, okay? Some type of set aside fund. With the approval of city council, what we did was get direct access to our economic stability fund to borrow against that for affordable housing. And then we pay it back into the stability fund through the general fund over a 10-year period. So very flexible, important funding for us. And I would recommend anybody who's looking for flexible funding in their community to talk to their budget directors about what funds they have and how they might be able to borrow against those funds for affordable housing. All right, now I'm going to talk specifically about the ARPA funding. So in the city of St. Petersburg, we're receiving essentially $45 million in ARPA funding. Now, we elected to use our $10 million standard allowance. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but in ARPA, you're allowed to take a standard allowance to basically repay the city for costs during COVID. Okay, so we passed $10 million of ARPA into our general fund, and then we're going to use that through the general fund, 6.5 million for our Deuces Rising affordable housing development. Again, very interesting. The city of St. Petersburg is acting as a developer to construct affordable townhomes. It's our project, we're the developer, and a lot of communities don't do that. So I think it's a very creative solution for us. And then 3.5 million of that money that we pass through to go towards a multifamily affordable housing. I don't want to get into too much detail. We've got some experts in the room too that could talk more about this, but with the ARPA guidelines, if you're going to enter into a long-term loan on an affordable housing development, you're probably going to have money from another funding source to match with ARPA, okay, to make that project work. And so when we pass this ARPA money into the general fund, that becomes flexible funding that we can use as the match. So that was very important to us. So far, we've appropriated money for housing administration and scattered site. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I think everybody kind of knows the timing of spending related to ARPA. So this is what I really want to talk about. And this is what we're doing with our ARPA funds related to housing. So the 6.5 million, where we're acting for the developer to construct 24 affordable townhomes for home ownership, the 3.5 million into the general fund, plus 16.5 million of ARPA, that's $20 million in an RFP for affordable multifamily housing that'll be going out this month. So are there any developers here? Keep your eye on that website. It's coming, guys, ladies, gents. All right. 2.5 million for scattered site family shelter. Gladys mentioned that we could use all the money to end homelessness. We all know that during COVID, family homelessness was on the rise. So we used $2.5 million to partner with an agency to provide shelter for homeless families because we have a waiting list right now in St. Petersburg. 1 million for permanent supportive housing services. We're very lucky in Pinellas County to have partners who provide housing for very low income individuals, but those individuals also need supportive services, wraparound services. There's a lot of funding available for the construction, not a lot of funding available for the human services that get provided. So this was a real opportunity for us to provide that money for those services. We set 3.5 million aside as backup for rental assistance. The ERA is being used very rapidly, the emergency rental assistance. We don't know what the Treasury is going to do on the reallocation. We may get a reallocation from the Treasury, but we set that aside for now. And then, of course, we did have some admin expenses. It's a significant amount of money of the total ARPA allocation that we're using for affordable housing. And I think, one of the things that people ask me is, how did St. Petersburg do this? How were you able to commit this much of your ARPA funding to affordable housing? And I'm gonna close on this. This is basically how we did it. The first thing we did is we went to the public. We had several community meetings and we asked the public to rank their priorities of ARPA eligible expenses. And we all know what the number one priority is. It's housing, okay? Whether you're very low income or you're upper middle income, it's across the spectrum. Concerns about housing are everywhere. So it's the number one priority. Then our city council members took those priorities from the public and they championed them. So we had general support on city council. We had a champion on city council, one champion who wouldn't let go and kept pushing for more of the ARPA funding for affordable housing. And she's sitting here today, Brandy Gabbard. And then we had a mayor come in, Mayor Welch, who sealed the deal and boosted up where we were at to an even higher level. And that's how we got to the 34 million for affordable housing out of the ARPA funds. I know this conference is about resiliency. I think we all know that affordable housing, there's a lot of components about affordable housing that relate to resiliency. But one thing that's so important to us, and in my opinion, to be a resilient community, you have to provide opportunities within your city limits for your workforce. We do not want to be a city that people have to drive to go to work. And we want to provide those opportunities for people in St. Petersburg. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
Hillary Bruno is the Assistant Director of Community Development in Pasco County. And
Are we pointing this? Oh, there we go. Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you all for sticking it out. This has been a really, really great conference. And I'm going to switch up a little bit about what I had planned to talk to you about, because as we're talking about all this resiliency stuff, I'm also going to do a plug for our owner-occupied rehab program. But first, I'm going to get into what I was actually invited here to talk about. So in August 2016, Hurricane Hermine hit. And we have an area you can see that is at the mouth of Tampa Bay. When you hear those horrible words, storm surge, you know the water is coming up the mouth of Tampa Bay. Meanwhile, at the top is the Anclote River, and we have a major watershed that goes right into the Anclote River. What happens? The two hit in the middle, the banks overflow right in the Elfers Parkway area. So during Hurricane Hermine, the Anclote River crested at 25 feet, which was 1 foot over major flood stage. More importantly, the roads are impossible for emergency management to pass. So we reached out, well, there's 212 residential properties that were eligible for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Related Fund Program. We were awarded $2.5 million, and 70% of our award had to go towards low and moderate income households. All of the acquired properties were going to be demolished, a land use restriction agreement placed on that, and it will remain green space in perpetuity. The benefit was Pasco County received CRS credits for reduced flood insurance for all residents countywide. Another benefit is when you do not have concrete, there's more space, there's more area for the water to percolate into the ground. So when we came up with our plan to demolish, we took out everything. We brought that land back to where it started from. So, yeah, I'm up here and I get to talk about a program. So I was told to limit to 3 slides and I didn't listen. But what I did was I put multiple slides together. So we did a lot of outreach, right? So I also inherited this program. I wasn't there at the genesis of it. There were promises that were made to residents in that area. We get an agreement and maybe everything isn't as it was supposed to be. So we had some challenges of overcoming the perception in the community. We did a lot of outreach to the Elfers homeowners. And one of the things we did was a direct mailing, and you can see, you could see this Elfers sign. That is how deep the water can get. We've seen it go even higher. But what's really important about that picture is you can see the rushing water. It is not a safe place for folks to be in the middle of this. So I like to call this a successful failure. Why is it a failure? Because we weren't able to fully expend our grant. But for the properties that we helped, we really helped. So far, we've acquired 4 properties. We began grant closeout and got another phone call, which is as things are. We've completed demolition of 3 properties. A lot of it has been a collaborated effort. We've gotten referrals from code enforcement for properties that were homeowner occupied that maybe were nearing the involuntary demolition stage. And as the slide says, right now we're at about $733,000 expended. We do have that 5th property in application stage. So what were some of the challenges? Oh, I've got more pictures. So that house is beautiful, right? That house was a modular, the one that you're looking at that's on your left. It was an absolutely gorgeous house, and my office fought very hard to see if we could move it. We were not able to move it. It was a shame. It was a beautiful house. They never had flood damage, but they qualified because emergency management could not get in. Obviously, they were income eligible. And that homeowner ended up moving to Hernando County without a mortgage. So we helped them. This property, and so on this postcard, because when I say that it wasn't a successful program, a lot of it has to do with we weren't able to get the applicants. Folks weren't coming to us saying, hey, buy my house. So you can see on this postcard, which was our second mailing, the assessed value of that beautiful house was slightly under $85,000, and we acquired it for $190,000. We have an appraiser that's going out doing appraisals as if it were August of 2016 before any damage happened. That was one of the options we had. I have a crystal ball, it's missing a part, and that's just like a standard joke I have in my office. If we could have looked in that crystal ball when we were setting up our plan and writing our policy and procedures, we had a choice. Do we go with current value today? Or do we go with what the value was in 2016? And at the point we made that decision, it was very much to the advantage of the homeowner for us to look at 2016. And I would guess that it's still an advantage using that date, because when a homeowner was coming to us, we were paying all closing costs. And especially with that house, we know they kicked tires with realtors and looking on the market. I'm a big believer, as you heard, to try and move that house. That would have been awesome. I'm a big believer in trying to have these properties gasp their last breath for us. So this house on the right, and I think we've got some pictures. Yeah, we'll go back to the leveraging opportunities. Oh, no, I'm going to go back to the lessons learned. So you can see in that left, we actually had a coordinated effort with our fire rescue, and they were able to go out and have a real life situation and do training. And that's invaluable. Busting down doors. And I know their commander he didn't make it easy. They blacked out the windows. They filled it with smoke. It was really cool. You can also see what one of the properties looked like before we started demolition and what it looked like afterwards. We also had leveraging opportunities. We're very fortunate in the state of Florida. We have SHIP dollars, and with our SHIP dollars through community development, we do a down payment assistance program, which is a 0% interest loan. It can be up to $15,000 or $25,000, depending on the income limit. We went into this program saying, well, we're gonna buy their house, and if they stay in Pasco County and they purchase another property in Pasco County, we're gonna give them $25,000 as a down payment grant, but you're also still eligible for a $25,000 0% interest loan for down payment. So we thought we were in a good place. What we found was a lot of fractured ownership, which made acquisition very difficult. And we found a lot of folks that are very happy in the community that they're in. And so it's really been a challenge. I think when you talk about best practices, our outreach, we had variable message signs out there. My team and I sat in McDonald's for a week. We were out there. And even now, even today, if you were to go out there, we have a 4-by-6 foot sign in front of every one of the properties we've acquired while it's in the process. So if a neighbor wants to know what's going on, they could just give us a call. So there's my information. Another thing I found out when I began to do a buyout program is I didn't know anybody who was doing a buyout program. So if there is a CDBG DR buyout program out there, and you want a little bit of help, please contact me, because I feel in a lot of instances, I remember we had those initial calls that it was really reinventing the wheel. So that's my presentation as far as the voluntary homeowner occupied buyout of the ELFRS program. But I did want to do a plug for our owner occupied rehabilitation program, because as we're talking about resiliency and preserving affordable housing, Pasco County Community Development has a very robust owner occupied program. And the whole purpose of it is to help folks remain in their homes, to preserve that affordable housing. We don't do grants, we do loans. It's a 0% interest loan, but what we do now, because we found that there was a population out there that wasn't willing or wasn't able to assume additional monthly debt, even at a 0% interest, we defer that second mortgage until sale or death. So yeah, I like to say we're super patient in Pasco County. Eventually we're gonna get our money, but we're just not in a rush for it. And our goal is to really help folks age in place and keep those properties affordable. And a big part of that is what I like to refer to as protecting the envelope. If your roof is leaking, nothing is good. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Oh, this is a hot mic. Okay, I take it all back. Thank you so much for that. So I just have a few questions for our panelists. So Rob, how will the city keep the momentum going established by its robust use of ARPA funds to achieve housing resilience? What other initiatives can you foresee that will take up where ARPA funds leave off?
Well, I appreciate that, Gladys. You know, I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk so much about some of the creative things we've done with the local funding sources, because, you know, I think they are so important. And, you know, I think we'll be very effective with the ARPA dollars and the things we want to do. And we went through that. But, you know, we're going to continue to look for unique ways. We worked very closely with our city council on the economic stability loan program. I think there's other opportunities out there. We're working right now on a potential employee assistance program, because some of our employees are struggling with housing as well. So, you know, I think the name of the game is listening to the doers in the community and finding ways to help them and coming up with creative solutions.
Thank you for that, listening. Okay, and this is in front of the councilwoman. What lessons has the city learned by adapting ARPA funds for affordable housing?
I know I got to be careful what I say, and I think, and maybe some people will agree with me, and people have probably heard me say this before. You know, I love some of the funding that comes down, but I struggle with a lot of the restrictions. And so it's not really something new for me, but, you know, now you're dealing with ARPA funds and you're not dealing with HUD, you're dealing with the Treasury. And then, you know, I talked about these complications with, you know, 25% of the funds have to be from a different source than ARPA, and you're dealing with all these regulations. It takes a lot of manpower. I mean, our budget team, our finance team, our grants team, everybody is involved. And, you know, you do have to pull all those people together. And we're super grateful for the funding, but I do wish sometimes it came with less strings attached.
Yeah, I can understand that. Of course, in housing, we've been dealing with those problems for a long time. Okay, Hillary, if not for the CDBG-DR funds, which have been in the works for quite some time, I mean, her mine was in 2016, yeah. What new initiatives would this county undertake to protect vulnerable residents from flood hazards?
Well, as I said, can you all hear me? Oh, there we go. As I said, we have a robust owner-occupied program, and we do work with some agencies in the flood zones that are providing services. And so that's kind of the area that we're moving in through my office, and I know through emergency management. There have been other initiatives, but I'm probably not as familiar with them as I should be.
You have a really great local mitigation strategy. which is done by the emergency management side of the
Yes.
county. How do you see working closer with them to do more housing?
So
with
we
their funding?
we are on that local mitigation strategy team, and we do assist with ranking those projects and trying to fill in, as well as trying to identify funding sources whenever possible.
Mhm. How long have you been part of that team? The mitigate, this is a trick question.
Long time,
Yeah,
5
right,
years, 6
right,
years. It's
right.
been a long time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is in most communities, the housing folks aren't really working with the local mitigation work group. And the local mitigation work group prepares the local mitigation strategic plan, which has an appendix in it of projects that cost money and it will get done. And if you have a housing resilience project and it's not in that book, it's not. And so that's why it's so important. And that's why we're so proud of Pasco County, because you guys have been working together for a long time on that.
Yes.
I mean, you moved Dade, Oaks, people
Mhm.
up to Hilltop, so that it's been a lot of flooding there.
And so you notice we're not gonna, we took a very flood prone property and we named it Hilltop, right? We wanted it to have nothing to do with being on ground level.
Right, and you use ship funds for that.
Yes,
Back then,
yes,
yeah,
it was a-
yeah. Okay, we can go to audience questions. Anybody have questions, comments out there? Yes.
I want to commend you on a couple things. One is your buyout was at the pre-storm price. That's really important and fair for families who have a lot of their wealth in the house, especially workforce families. The other thing I want to share that's important is that the work you're doing is being discussed long-term, which is what the work you're doing is what managed retreat looks like, to do it incrementally without, massive takings. And then I want to share some failures from New York that hopefully can inform as your program grows and you keep doing what you're doing to look for these other indicators. So one of the failures of New York was after Sandy, a massive buyout program in Staten Island in these vulnerable bungalow communities. And they bought them out at the pre-storm price, but it still wasn't enough for them to stay in Staten Island, much less stay in New York City. So almost everyone that received the buyout had to move out of New York. Now, one or two people is one thing, but when there's thousands of families, you start to change the culture of the place. And a lot of those families depend on adjacency to New York for either their jobs or for grandmother to watch the kids while they go to work, that kind of stuff. So I'd ask you to look for that in the future. Is there ways in doing the buyouts to, not displace folks out of your county and keep them in the region?
So the $25,000 down payment assistance grant was tied specifically to try and prevent people from relocating outside of Pasco County. What we found, aside from the one homeowner that moved up to Hernando, which was to be closer to family, was people were selling to us for different reasons other than their flooding. And we turned out to be just the answer that they were looking for at that particular time. And because of that, they have relocated outside of the county. That was never our intention. And that's specifically why we didn't put any moving incentives in there, because the DR program will allow for us to pay moving costs, those sorts of things. We thought we were just going to tie it all up into that down payment assistance to make people want to stay. I think we had a year delay because of COVID as well. And during that time, as we all know, property values exploded and that $25,000 was not enough to keep people.
Thank you, Walter.
Oh, thank you. I am amazed. We got 285 million, and until last Wednesday, we had only allocated 2.8 million towards affordable housing, and which was making me ill inside. Let's just go there. But that being said, what I heard you say is how you got where you got when you made the decision for investing your ARPA money in affordable housing. You said you surveyed the community. we have not been very successful at getting feedback. How did that go? Because I think it really is valuable when you have an approach to asking people what they need or want, matters when you're getting buy-in from a community and allowing them to be heard. How did you do that? I'm very curious.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for, saying how much more you would like to do in your community and for championing that in your community. So thank you for that. In St. Petersburg, we're very blessed with very strong community groups, whether they're neighborhood associations or other groups that are active in the community. They were very interested in how the ARPA money was going to be spent. We did 3 public meetings, 3 workshops at community centers. We had good participation, and we asked them, everybody, to score their priorities. And by far, housing affordability was number 1. And just so you know, equity and social issues were number 2. Infrastructure was pretty far down the list. And now I will admit that we had our CIP budget meeting the other day, and some of us were looking at each other like, wow, we could have, used a few extra dollars, but the budget reflects your priorities, right? And we made this decision, and this is our priority. So we got to find other ways to deal with the infrastructure because we're making this commitment. And the community, I think, helped push it quite a bit.
A lot of communities had already put infrastructure in their budgets. And then they realized that those projects were really not ready to go. And so then they were able to switch over to housing. And there's other money now for infrastructure, the Infrastructure Act, so that's one reason. Yes, go ahead.
Gladys, can you speak a little more to putting the housing projects into the local mitigation strategy? Is that specifically tied to the CDBG requirements, or is there other things that go along with that too?
Oh, yeah, okay. The local mitigation strategy, strategic plan, that has projects in it that you're going to be asking FEMA for money through the State Division of Emergency Management. And it really is for disaster management and preparation and things like that. But as Hillary was able to show, there are houses that are repetitively flooding. And so you can use those funds in there. The CDBG funds, well, if it's the block grant post-disaster, those are really targeted to impacted properties, unless there's other things. They were only impacted properties for you. Yeah,
It was an impacted area.
impacted
And
area.
Therefore, we didn't have to, the house that had never had flooding, because emergency personnel could not access it, it was still considered a dangerous environment. And I also forgot to say about that house, we had an unlicensed contractor sting before it was demolished, and I believe there were 28 arrests out of that.
But, oh my goodness, the block grant funds, though, they mix very well with FEMA dollars, because FEMA dollars require a 25% non-federal match, and block grants are considered non-federal because they're already local. So you'll see that a lot. They'll combine it. In Palm Bay, they bought out 13 homes, and those homes had been in the book for years. And finally, when the block grant funding came, they went ahead and did it. More. All right. Okay, that's it. We're gonna close the gate.